I had a problem. A camera I bought in 2019 was having a problem. And not just any problem, an intermittent problem, the worst kind of problem to have. They're hard to troubleshoot, and because you don't know when it's going to happen, you can't trust your gear. And when you can't trust your gear, you have a much bigger problem. Okay, I make talking head videos for YouTube. My setup is two cameras, a Sony A7S III and a Panasonic GH5. I bought the GH5 in 2019, and before I got the Sony, it was my main camera. When the GH5 was released, it was ahead of its time. You can shoot 4K 60, you can record in 422 10-bit, it records in log, and it has excellent stabilization. When I bought my A7S III in 2021, it became my main camera. With great autofocus and the ability to shoot S-Log3, it was, and still is, a great camera. When I started using the GH5 as my B camera, it only had two issues. One was its fault, and one wasn't. The first issue was poor autofocus. This isn't a big surprise. The GH5 is known for a lot of good features, but autofocus isn't one of them. The second issue was it didn't match color with my A7S III very well. That wasn't its fault. You can't expect cameras from different manufacturers to match colors. Me trying to match Sony and Panasonic cameras, well, that was on me. Now I had workarounds for both issues. For color matching, I used DaVinci Resolve to get as close as I could. It wasn't perfect, but I got it close enough, at least for me. For the autofocus issue, my workaround was to switch to manual and use the Panasonic app to touch to focus. It was great until recently when I started to have problems connecting to the app. At first, it wasn't a big deal. Restart the app, power cycle the GH5, and most times it would connect. During one shoot, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. The blue light on my GH5 kept intermittently shutting off. When it was off, the app would disconnect. That makes sense. The blue light was for the Wi-Fi. Without Wi-Fi, the app wouldn't connect to my GH5, and that meant I couldn't touch to focus. That wasn't good. I could have just set up a target and manually focused, but that was a lot of work and I couldn't be sure I was nailing focus. What I wanted was a camera that had good autofocus that was as good as my A7S III. I also wanted a camera that matched colors with my A7S III. So I had a good reason to get a new camera. So I started looking at cameras. If you're like me, when you're buying new gear, you have a lot of decisions to make. You have brands, models, features, and a lot of other requirements that you need to figure out before you spend money on gear. So lots of choices. The first choice was easy. I wanted to stick with Sony. All of their cameras have great autofocus, and because they were all using Sony Color Science, I was reasonably sure I could match colors between my A7S III and any new Sony camera. The hardest part was done, right? Well, not really. Sony has a lot of mirrorless cameras. Depending on how you count them, they have between 18 and 24 cameras. Because I didn't want to spend more than about $2,500 on a camera, I narrowed it down to about 10. The first camera on my radar was the ZVE1. It seemed perfect. The same exact sensor as my A7S III, 4K 120, great autofocus, and it was within my budget. It was perfect, except for one small thing. It has a problem with overheating. If you shoot for a very long time, like I do, the ZVE1 may overheat. That was a deal breaker. I can't use a camera that may quit working in the middle of a long shoot. I know you can add an external fan, but I really didn't want to rely on a fan to keep my camera going. So, back to shopping. Next, I found the A6700. It's primarily a photo camera, but it also shoots videos. It was even cheaper than the ZVE1. That was good, but then I saw it had two issues. One, it didn't have 4K 120, and like the ZVE1, it also had an overheating problem. This was getting more difficult. I kept jumping between camera bodies daily, sometimes several in one day. Just about the time I would find a camera that had one good feature, like it didn't overheat, I would find that it had another issue, like a micro HDMI connector, another deal breaker. This was crazy. I just needed a second camera to replace my GH5. I didn't want to spend $3,000 on a photo camera that did video. So, how do I narrow my choices down? I needed to look at this a different way. I had to figure out a more scientific way to compare the huge number of Sony cameras. As an engineer, I thought about it and I decided I needed to build a chart to help me decide. Since I'm an old engineer, a chart to me equals only one thing, an Excel spreadsheet. No, really, I built a spreadsheet comparing all the different Sony cameras. Once I started down this path, it got easier. The columns were where I put each camera, the cheapest to the left and the most expensive to the right. So the A6700 was the first camera to the left, and the A7S III was at the far right. It was well out of my price range, but I put it in for comparison. For the rows, I put my requirements in order. The more important the requirement, the higher the row. The top row was good autofocus. That had to be my top requirement. Next came the ability to match the A7S III. Below that was 422 10-bit video. Since all of the cameras I was comparing had all those three features, those were all gimmies. Next, it started to get real. I put no overheating as the next requirement. After that, the order was USB streaming at 4K 30, 4K 120, HDMI port size, and finally, sensor size. This was my least important requirement. That may seem odd, but to me, APS-C cameras have gotten so good with low light, video resolution, and overall picture quality, I was okay with a crop sensor camera. The features above were more important than sensor size. If I had more full-frame lenses, I would have leaned towards a full-frame camera. But since I was also going to need a lens with the camera, I was okay with APS-C. One other benefit of APS-C is the lenses are usually cheaper. Another plus. So here's my chart, or spreadsheet. It's kind of busy, so let me walk you through it. As I mentioned, the cameras are in the columns, and the features are in order down the rows. Anything with a green is good. Yellow is not good. As you can see from the chart, it's easy to pick out the better candidates by the colors. Near the bottom of the list are the totals. I totaled up the number of good features by the total features and got a fraction. A camera with a 4 out of 7 would mean they had 4 green boxes and 3 yellow. The lowest scoring cameras were 4 of 7. Better cameras scored 5 of 7. Even better ones scored 6 of 7. The only perfect 7 of 7 was my A7S III. That was kind of unexpected, but it did validate my purchase of my A7S III almost 5 years ago. If money weren't a problem, I would have just gotten another A7S III. But since I wanted to stay around the $3,000 mark, including the lens, an A7S III was out of the question. So the 3 top cameras scoring 6 of 7 on my list were the FX30, the FX2, and the A7V. Since the A7V was $2,900, I took it out of contention, since there was no way I was going to get it and a lens for even close to $3,000. So I was down to 2 options, the FX30 and the FX2. On paper, they're both very similar. The only major differences to me were that the FX30 didn't natively stream 4K 30 out of the USB-C port, and the FX2 didn't have 4K 120. Also, the FX30 is APS-C and the FX2 is full frame, but that didn't matter as much to me as streaming and 4K 120. As I mentioned earlier, I currently only live stream 1080p, so the lack of 4K 30 was bad on the FX30, but it wasn't hopeless. If I did decide to stream in 4K, I could use my current solution for streaming with my GH5, which is the CamLink 4K. Not a great workaround, but it does get me 4K. When it comes to 4K 120, there really isn't a workaround. If a camera doesn't have it, it just doesn't. That really sealed it for me. The camera I needed was the FX30. I picked one up and have been using it for the last few videos. The autofocus is incredible. It's also extremely easy to match to my A7S III. The FX30 is my first Sony cinema camera, and I love using it. The FX30 has some features that I wish my A7S III had, namely shutter angle and Cine EI mode. I haven't played with the Cine EI yet, but I can't wait. Now I only have one APS-C lens, the Sigma 18-50 2.8. I'm looking at getting another lens, maybe a wide prime. If you have any suggestions, please let me know in the comments. So how did I do with the FX30? Is there another camera you would have picked? If money weren't an issue, I would have gotten an A7S III, or maybe even an FX3. That's a fantastic camera. But for less than half the cost of an FX3, I get a camera that does 95% of what the FX3 can do. Well, there you go. My process for deciding to get an FX30 as a second camera. If you made it this far in the video, thanks for watching. As always, if you like this video, give it a like. And if you like this type of content, maybe consider subscribing. Thanks for watching, and we will see you in the next video.